Appreciate it. Hey, everybody, this is Shad, chair of the Black Caucus of the Young Democrats of America. Tonight, I am hosting a conversation using hashtag IAM365 via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and all of the other social media platforms. Just want to introduce some friends from the Young Democrats of America who are joining me tonight. We have Courtney Driver, who serves as the chairman and co-founder of the California Young Democrats Black Caucus. We also have Brother Joseph Kitchens, aka the Reverend, who serves as the president of the Maryland Young Democrats, and Morgan Hill Jr., who serves as the president of the Idaho Young Democrats. And later on, we'll be joined by Archange Antoine, who is the chairman and founder of the New Jersey Young Democrats Black Caucus. So tonight we wanted to highlight some of our leadership in the Young Democrats of America at the state level within our Black caucuses and our state presidents, who just happen to be African American, and we're very grateful for the work that they do on the national level and in their states and locally. And we're going to get started. So tonight's conversation, we're going to talk about Sankofa a little bit. We all know that Sankofa is the thought process behind looking backwards to kind of gauge your future, understanding the past so that you have a better viewpoint of your future as you move forward, kind of like, hindsight is 2020, that type of thing. The problem is right now in America, we have a lot of actions that are coming forward that we've seen in our past, and now they're here, mainstream America. We're seeing new episodes of racism that we have not seen in about 50 years. And I think it's, very coincidental that between 2013 through 2017, we'll be celebrating a lot of the 50th anniversaries regarding civil rights, a lot of the goals or the successes of the civil rights movement and the changes in racial justice and social justice. We're celebrating a lot of the 50th anniversaries. In a few weeks, we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the crossing of the Edward Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, the march from Selma to Montgomery. So it's very interesting that a lot of these actions are happening in America at this present time. So I'm going to let my guest join in the conversation and take it away. But I think it's very interesting that we're seeing a lot of the activities of the past move to the forefront. And I guess my question to you all to start this conversation is, what does it say about the direction that America is going in right now? Okay, ladies first. Go ahead, Courtney.
Put me on the spot. Hey guys, I'm just happy to be here tonight. I think it says a lot. I think that it says that we're not doing enough. I'm sorry, I keep cutting out. I think it says that, we've done a lot of work and we still have a lot to do. And I think we need to continue to study what's happened in the past so that we know what mistakes we don't need to repeat again.
And I totally agree with you, Courtney. I think from my perspective, what I've seen over the last couple of years, especially when Barack Obama became president in 2008, is a culture of fear that's really starting to sweep through the nation. And I mean, we've seen it elevate over the last couple of years, but I think it's starting to really reach, a peak to the point where people are really afraid of anything that is different from what they're actually used to. So you're seeing a lot of whether it's racist or hateful or homophobic, you're seeing a lot of really sick behavior coming out of people right now across the nation, and we have to do a better job at addressing that and being more open about some of the issues that are causing what we're seeing today.
Joseph, did you want to weigh in on that?
I think everyone has pretty much said what it has said pretty much what it is. I think at some point, though, comes our time to have a conversation about the need for continuous involvement and a continuous movement around issues that are important to our community. And I think that, sadly, what happened after President Obama's election in 2008 is that we allowed ourselves to fall into this feeling that this naive feeling that that a lot of our issues have been addressed because we had a black president. And I think that the limits on presidential leadership, and not just presidential leadership, black presidential leadership, have now been exposed. And so, President Obama wasn't elected to solve all of the black community's issues. He was elected to solve America's issues, and sometimes we've put him in a position that's been hard for him to navigate there. So I think that's been part of, but I think that that's partially because we see our progress through the eyes of individuals and not through the eyes of like specific accomplishments. And I think we need to start looking at what are our goals that we're trying to achieve, and how do we achieve those goals, and how do we measure those goals, as opposed to looking through the eyes of specific individuals. And so we're all very happy with President Obama's election, but his election did not move the ball forward. Actually, in some respect, it could have moved the ball backwards. Because now, when we try to have the conversation around race and equality and things like that, we've made it a lot easier for people to be, well, there's a black president, and there are more black governors, and there are more black senators. Those are individuals, but their elections does not mean that the issues that we fought for have been addressed.
I agree. So my question to you all would be, how do we address that ignorance? Because I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's pure ignorance to think that one man is going to solve all of the woes of the world. I think it's very interesting how in our community in particular, we often see our leaders in this godlike persona. We have one leader, whether it's our pastor, our mayor, our President Obama, governor of a state. We have that one black man in charge, who we look at as if they're a god, and we expect them to solve the problems of the world concerning us, concerning our community. I think that's a very unrealistic expectation. But how do we move our community past that?
Well, I think, just to weigh in on that, I think that we have to, for one thing, stop creating the expectation ourselves. And if you remember, going back to President Obama's campaign, for instance, since we're on the topic, his whole theme in 2008 was hope. And so a lot of people really clinched to that idea that if we hope enough, if we put enough positive effort behind something, then maybe this man who we elect to office will rally enough people in order to create a lot of good for everyone at large. When, on the other hand, his election, in my opinion, created as much bad as it did good. Because he also started to see, like we've been talking about already, the ugly side of America starting to resurface, and really showing that racism, although it's kind of it still is a very taboo topic for a lot of people, but it's really come out to the surface to the point where the topic is basically an unavoidable thing right now. People can't seem to get enough of it. And I think coming into that kind of environment with a lot of hope, I think also stems from the fact that around that same time we had such a poor economy. Our country was basically at its worst point economically for a lot of people. So when you're so down on the ground, the only place you really have to go is up from there. So people in general were really hoping for a lot of things to happen. And I think from President Obama's standpoint, you know, a lot of people, especially within the Black community, were hoping that he would be that representative for the Black community when he's essentially representing the entire country. So not only did we have a much slower recovery than we really hoped from the bad times that we were going through, but we also have a community, you know, us, the Black community, looking up to this man who we were hoping would essentially make better of a situation that continues to be, you know, perpetually worse. You know, we haven't really seen that, and I think it really goes back to us as a community setting the expectation that we a lot of times have to not just depend on a figure who may be there to set the tone and set the stage for things to improve, because if that doesn't happen, you know, we're setting ourselves up for a lot of disappointment. And you know, I mean, we can go on and on about, you know, all of the issues facing the Black community today, and like you said, it was very naive of a lot of people to think that he would be, you know, essentially that Black representative, the person who would lift the community, lift a lot of people out of where they were. And you know, when that type of thing doesn't happen, you know, it can drag a lot of people down.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Archange, can you jump in here? We can't hear you if you're talking. Try again. Okay. We can't hear you. All right. But okay, so moving forward, where do we, if America continues down the path that it's on, that we've seen in the past 2 years, since February, March 2013, beginning with the death of Trayvon Martin. You know, since then we've had Jordan Davis and now, you know, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. But there have been a lot of other things that have happened in between those major profiled incidents. If America continues down this path, where do you see us in the next 25 years? When we're 55, well, we're approaching, you know, 50 and 55 years old. Where do you see the country, not necessarily us as individuals, but where do you see the country concerning African Americans?
I think I don't know that we'll continue down the same path. That's not something that I think that will happen. I think that things will either get worse or they'll get better. I don't know that they'll stay the same. And quite frankly, I mean, because that's just not history. I mean, there comes a time when things have to get worse before they can get better. And I think actually the proliferation of social media, of cell phones and things like that will make moving forward, will make getting better so much easier. I think so. What always interests me a lot is the different response to the death and to Trayvon Martin's death, to Michael Brown's death, and then the response to Eric Garner's death. So there was this united, wide sweeping outcry to Eric Garner's death, and a lot of that was because we saw it. We saw what happened. We know what happened, and then the responses were different in Trayvon's death and Michael Brown's death, and that's mainly because we were left up to the interpretation of other people's words versus the sworn police officer's word, or other people's word versus George Zimmerman's word, and we didn't really see it. And then it allowed the door to be open to character assassinations on those individuals. Whereas we know from knowing that Eric Garner was engaged in behavior that was illegal at the time, but whether or not it was illegal, the question exists: was it was his behavior. Did his behavior justify the use of force by the police officers? And from what we saw, we see that was not that's not actually the case. And so I know that I think that what we now know from these incidents is that we need the ability to continue to monitor police interactions with people of color, and now not only just that, but to have oversight and enforcement when those interactions turn deadly. And unfortunately, we don't have that now, and we know what we need to do next, and we just need to continue to put the pressure on our elected officials to deliver on that. And I think the community that did this the best is actually the Hispanic community. It's not easy to put the pressure on politicians who are in office that you like. It's not easy to do, but the Hispanic community, Latino community, said that yes, we like President Obama, yes, we like the Democrats, but we're going to force their hand to do what we want them to do. And every day they're going to hate us, and they're going to tell us, oh, you're bagging us into a position that it's either us or them. And the Latinos said, well, you're there now, and you're not helping us now, and so we want you to help us. And so we're going to continue to challenge you every single day. I think the difference with our people is that we don't want to openly challenge politicians who we feel we like and force them to do what we need them to do because we like them. And I think that that's where we just have to start. That's where we have to change our mentality. That we like President Obama. Yes, we like the Democrats. We like all the Missouri Democrats. Yes, we do like them. But it's not okay that they sat silent and allowed the situations in Missouri to erupt. Or it's not even okay in California, the Oscar Grant situation, which predated all of this. The Oscar Grant situation in Oakland that predated all of this. All of those elected officials are Democrats, and all of this happened, and we didn't openly challenge those elected officials because we liked them.
So, Joseph, I have a question for you. Along that line of thinking, we were all at CBC, and we love our CBC members, and we're so grateful for them. But I guess my question if I were someone who were watching this conversation, or in 5 years I'm going through YouTube and I come up on this video and I hear you say that, my question would be, how do I challenge my elected official? Like, we always say that, you need to hold our elected officials accountable, but what does that accountability look like? And how do we do that? Like, what are the steps that we take to do that? And how do I respond when that elected official comes to me on a sidebar and says, hey, brother, I'm trying my hardest, you're making me look bad, or, I really am trying the hardest, but I'm the only minority, I'm the only Democrat, I'm the only person of color on this city council or county commission, or on this committee in the state house or state senate. How do we maneuver towards that accountability?
Like I said, I think the community that used it the best was most recently was the Hispanic community, and then anybody who watched Selma see how the civil rights movement actually used it effectively by saying that we're going to continue to challenge people that we like. Yes, so Dr. King preferred President Johnson over President Nixon. He preferred the Democrats over the Republicans, but that didn't make him sad. When President Johnson wanted him to not be so loud, not be so voiceful, not push him so hard, Dr. King said he had to. I have to push you. I have to keep this in the headline. I have to because if this is not in the headline, you're not going to talk about it, and you're not going to think about it. So I have to keep you thinking about it. And so I think that that's what we need to do. So that a Latino community, through organizations like United We Dream and other communities like that, is everywhere President Obama went, everywhere Hillary Clinton went, everywhere Joe Biden went, everywhere the national Democratic leaders went, they were there. They protested, they heckled, they brought media attention to their cause, because every time President Obama gave a speech, every time Michelle Obama gave a speech, there was someone there to challenge them on their issue. And then the media immediately asked them afterwards, there was heckling at your speech. This is what the heckling was about. What do you think about it? And they had to answer to that. They have to answer in response to that. We don't do those type of things because we like our elected officials. We like them, and we just don't think we should do that because they're Democrats and they're trying as hard as they can. No, we need to say this is what we need. Our people are dying. Our people are not being helped. We need you to help us, and you're gonna have to continue to answer to us every single day until you do. And so I think that those are just some tangible ways to continue to hold our elected officials accountable by making sure you're in their face every single day, holding them accountable. It's not saying I'm not going to vote for you, but it's saying that you're going to talk about my issue everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, I'm going to force you to talk about it.
So, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, praise God.
All right, praise it. Yeah, so let me just add to what the brother just said. I just think there's always various ways to influence elected officials. And I think, I think it's great to be in the forefront, heckling, holding signs up. I mean, sometimes you just need to, those things need to happen. But there's also effective ways to put pressure on elected officials behind the scenes. And I think it's about making sure that you're at the table, you know how things happen. And I think sometimes if you have a relationship where you're trying to maintain, but at the same time, there's an agenda that you're trying to push, sometimes you can give people timelines. And if they don't meet those timelines or they don't come through, then you let them know that this is beyond, it's out of your hands. At the same time, I think there are there are ways to get people who are concerned about these issues in the community to be the voice for everyone else. And so, I mean, I think that's why coalitions are important, so that they can be the ones putting the same amount of pressure behind the scenes on an individual like you and I would want to do. And they can be more effective. And even though it might not be you per se, you can be a hand in making sure that they understand how the political process works, the legislative process works, so they can be more effective. And so I just think that, again, while we continue to focus on areas that we can be in the forefront in the public, I think there are just as effective ways to be and more behind the scenes. And a lot of behind the scenes is where you start to understand some of the more complicated reasons why things are not moving as quickly as possible. But again, I think like sometimes, that ego, there's ego that kicks in sometimes, and I think behind the scenes you can kind of handle a lot of stuff and put pressure just as much as in front.
And just to add on to that, I think what a lot of people are not also realizing is the politicians out there, if they don't see an immediate need to prioritize on something, if there isn't enough public outrage on a particular issue, generally they won't really be inclined to act on it. Now, tell me, why would it be so important for the political community or even the president at the very highest level to all of a sudden be in a panic outrage over Ebola, for instance? It seemed like such a ridiculous thing for people to freak out over, but the problem is that the media, everybody else, were in a state of panic and outrage, and it created some sense of urgency that we ought to address this issue that was basically a non-issue. When you have just one person out of 600 million people dying, obviously we're not facing some kind of disease that's going to sweep over our nation. So what we have to think about, just like Archange just mentioned, we need to do a better job at coalition building and getting the word out about what affects our community. And I can tell you for a fact that, black people in the United States, we're still a minority. We're a really, really, really small minority compared to the rest of the population still. Now, if you're in the minority of a population and you're making some noise occasionally when somebody gets shot, or when some case of injustice happens somewhere else that seems to be elevated up in the media all of a sudden, when people are only seeing these isolated incidents popping up across the nation, and throughout the year, we don't see any other major issues within our community being pushed out to the forefront, I don't really see how in the world our politicians would feel any sense of urgency to really address some of the issues that are affecting our community. So I think, and you know, we see this so many times. The most outrageous issues are all of a sudden on the news, and every congressperson to the president are now commenting on something that's a complete non-issue, you know. So we really need to think about how do we make our issues a priority, how do we build more coalitions with people who are not just within the Black community, but those who have a reach to be able to get our word out and our message out to the community at large, because that's what I think will really make it or break it. Because if we're talking about this issue just amongst ourselves, or really getting vocal, like I was saying, when we have a tragedy like Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin, that will, for a guarantee, be on the news cycle for about a week or two and then disappear, then really our issues are not a priority for these politicians to care about in the first place.
Well, Rashad, do you mind if I touch base on something, or are you trying to move forward?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I wanted to also talk about is a combination of, I think we also need to be realistic about the country that we live in. I think the country, you know, a lot of times what we talk about is, you know, I heard a comment about sometimes the president made things worse. It's not you made things worse. It's not like when if you put $100 out, if you put a couple of dollars out on your table, and normally a couple of dollars go missing, and then you put $100 later down the line and it goes missing, and then eventually you find out it was your cousin. It's not that it was worse when you started putting more money out. It's just the fact that he's always been a thief. And I think that in this country, it's a realistic picture of what Black folks have gone through in this country and the residues that still exist from an institutional standpoint. And so the point I'm trying to make is that I think while, yes, individuals and coalitions can do a better job with trying to convey the message or bring the message or trying to strategize, I think there are some factors that are continuously working against us. I mean, one, you're talking about us trying to get our message out to media that we don't even control, and scenarios that they create that majority of the country starts to believe, that sometimes is based on stereotypes and misinformation and perpetuations of just straight ignorance. And so again, I just say that while we're continuing to focus on some of these elected officials and trying to get them to move the agenda, remember this, they also base some of their decisions on the dynamics of how people are feeling and polls and information like that. And polls and individuals are affected by media and information out there. And so again, I feel that while we've been doing a hell of a job over the last, you know, decades and years and centuries, I just also feel that it's a larger picture. And like you said, we can't do it alone, but we have to just be realistic of how much we can actually get done. And so again, it's not trying to be pessimistic about a situation. It's just trying to get us a reality that everything is interconnected, and we can't focus all our energy in one particular area, that we have to diversify, because all of these areas are working together towards advancing Black people in America.
Absolutely. Now, talking about advancement, I kind of want to go on to the second topic, you know, talking about self-hate. This is kind of a new concept to me. I know that this is not a new concept in real life, but, you know, and I've never really even thought about the term self-hate. You know, I think, you know, that there are people who have low self-esteem, But if you don't love yourself, then how can you expect somebody else to? But when it comes down to this self-hate thing, I find it to be very disappointing when I see the same issues that mainstream America, or the same schisms and isms that mainstream America has inflicted onto Black America, that we turn around and repeat the cycle of ignorance, or the cycle of arrogance, or the cycle of oppression, and isms within our own community. Can you hate another Black person? Absolutely. We have colorism in our community. This light skin versus dark skin thing is actually horrible in our community. And then we have the issues where we disassociate ourselves with people who are biracial or multiracial, who have one parent who is part, or African American. We have a whole lot of issues. I mean, from the paper bag test to the whole good hair versus bad hair thing, HBCUs versus PWIs. We have a whole lot of issues in our community where we try to separate ourselves and make ourselves seem better than other people of color who look like us. I think that in 2015, considering what we're dealing with, maybe that's counterproductive and not helping us out.
I think sometimes we allow that conversation to overtake reality. That is not genuine to just Black people. It is a feeling that all ethnicities and cultures go through, and we just we just blow it up in our community. So in the Hispanic community, they have a huge ism between those who speak Spanish and those who don't, or there's a huge ism between those who are from Mexico, and then those who are not from Mexico. And so I think, but we allow ourselves to we allow ourselves to make those issues bigger than what they are. I mean, I think Courtney can talk a lot about about the colorism and things like that. Being a woman of lighter color, who is leading the Black Caucus, and some people probably will look at her and be like, "Girl, you're not even dark enough to be doing that." So,
that is true.
But that's not unique to our community. That is something that all communities do. I mean, Asians. There's a huge issue in Asia about between the lighter you are and the darker you are, your skin, more fair your skin color is versus not fair your skin color is, or boys versus girls in Asian communities. So these things are not unique to us, but sometimes we make them unique to us, and they're not at all. I mean, don't even get started about Jews and about how marrying a non-Jew can actually get you excommunicated from the faith. So these are not just only our issues, they're everyone's issues, and we sometimes feed into the negativity of the outside by blowing those issues up.
Yeah, I would say you're right, and again, I always like to go back to the original question, which is, who taught you to hate yourself? Who taught you to hate your complexion of your skin? Who taught you that you are and they are less inferior? And I think that those questions right there, if we begin to answer those are kind of give us, the realistic picture of what we're dealing with. And so, I think, personally, I feel like when you look at Black history, even the word Black is a word that people didn't even want to be associated with until a movement which was Black is beautiful. And people started saying Black is beautiful, and the darker the berry, the sweeter the juice. And we had these cliches and we had these philosophies that started to develop in our community, which made people say, hey, you know what? I want to be as Black can be. And I think if we want to counter that, we're going to have to continue teaching our kids and our youth and ourselves that black is beautiful. And so again, the point I always like to make is that I think one of the most important institutions that can play a more effective role in trying to change the scenario within our community is the church and institutions of faith. Every single Sunday you go to various churches all around the country and you have tons and tons of black folks in these churches, from youth to older senior folks. And again, I think a lot of the leaders need to take a conscious approach to include that in the sermons, in the teachings, as well as supplemental educations. I'm talking about 30 minutes before Bible study, teaching on what it means to be black, or blackness, or colorism, and the importance of loving yourself. And I think if we connect that to what God sees us as men and women in the faith, I think ultimately, I don't think God would want anyone to believe that one group is superior to the other, or one complexion of skin is superior to the other. So again, I think that's where we need to be doing a more effective job at.
And you know what's interesting about that? I mean, it's interesting to me how quick people forget about history, or some of the people that we idolize as a community, some of the important things that they've said, such as Dr. King. He said that he hopes to have a place where children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, right? Now, that should essentially be the basis behind how we live. I can tell you that when I came to the United States when I was a young kid, I was about 8 years old. I didn't speak English at all. I had to learn English from scratch. I lived in a community that was mostly black. I went to an elementary school that was mostly black. And I cannot tell you enough how many times I was given crap for not just being lighter skinned, but for not speaking English to begin with. I was treated like that kid that wasn't black enough, and also the kid that wasn't, that kid that was an immigrant. When I grew up, or growing up through South Florida, I started getting into rock and roll. I wasn't a very religious person. I'm actually an atheist guy. Compared to a lot of the other African Americans in the community that I grew up with, someone who was immigrant, liked a lot of different things, I wasn't really treated very well by other black people. I can tell you, until I went to college, I really wasn't treated well by a lot of black people at all. So for the longest time, until I really kind of grew up and matured and started understanding the situation more, I honestly hardly had any black friends who were American. A lot of my black friends were from Haiti, Jamaica, or some other country who really understood what I was going through, and we were really able to identify with that, I guess, piece of the black community who were essentially outcasted by the rest. And to us, it just feels like a very hypocritical way to treat people. Like, just because they're different, oh, we're going to treat them badly. Well, isn't that what black people had to suffer and endure for millennia? And now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, excuse me, but, we're doing this, people are essentially doing the same thing to others that has been happening to them for the longest time. And like you were saying, RK, just now, people need to start these lessons at home, teaching their kids that, hey, everyone should be judged by the content of their character, because how would you feel if you were being judged and treated differently just because of the way that you look? And I think that a lot of people overlook that lesson that could be taught to their kids, to the point where you have children in school or even later on in life with this incredible bias because, hey, this black person is a little bit different than me, or this black person listens to rock and roll, why don't they listen to hip-hop? And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You know, why isn't this person Christian? Why isn't this person Baptist? And it just really, you know, when you start looking at, you know, self-hate and little things like that, you know, there's another flip side to the coin as well. You know, people like me who were kind of cornered off by the black community for such a long time growing up, you know, I felt such a pressure for a while that I needed to try to fit in. And so it creates an even more pressure to try to understand what it is to be black. And I mean, even President Barack Obama talks about this, you know, when he went to Chicago, you know, being a guy who grew up in Hawaii, raised by a white mother, you know, he really at first had a hard time trying to identify and understand, you know, everything about the other half of his heritage. And I think a lot of that is due in part to people not really embodying that value that Dr. Martin Luther King tried to really communicate to everyone, that, hey, it's not just about the way that we look, because I can guarantee you that he wasn't just addressing the fact that white people were treating black people in a negative way. It was also happening internally in our community. And that really continues to be true today. How do we fix that? I don't really know, other than the fact that we have to address that, you know, amongst ourselves and have it be something that we teach our kids and fix that for future generations. But, you know, Joseph also pointed out, when you look at Asia, for instance, there are so many, you know, I think it's either Singapore or the Philippines, so don't quote me on this exactly, but a lot of people walk with an umbrella in the sunlight or when it's not raining at all, so they can prevent themselves from getting darker, because apparently there is a negative connotation to people who are darker skinned, and it signifies that that person, if they are darker skinned, that they work in the fields and they are of a lower socioeconomic status. So I mean, you have these issues all over the world, but I feel like we've had such great leaders like Dr. King and others in the past who have really, you know, really tried to get the point across that, you know, it's not about just the color of our skin. And I feel like we've done a lot of damage to our community by really perpetuating this whole, oh, you're not black enough because you're not, you know, dark enough, or you listen to this, you're not, you know, religious enough, or this other stuff. It just really it makes situations very tense, so to say.
I agree with Morgan. I think we have the responsibility to help boost the self-esteem of our young African American children, because we're already getting torn down in the media for being black. But I mean, in private, at home, we need to be teaching, you know, about black Americans, you know, who've done great things, not only, you know, during Black History Month. We need to be doing it all year long, because it's all about education. As long as we know where we come from and the struggle, you know, how we got here, the significance of black history, you know, when we're educating our youth, I think that will significantly bring down self-hate when they understand where they come from and the greatness of it.
A part of that educating our youth is, you know, educating ourselves. You know, Morgan, I'm very apologetic to you for what you had to endure as a child.
All right, don't worry about it.
You know, but the idiots who were picking on you, you know, obviously they didn't know themselves. They didn't know black history, because everybody knows that black people started rock and roll. Bam. The baddest, you know, the baddest man on the guitar, Jimi Hendrix. Bam. Pretty sure he was black. I don't care what anybody says. Lenny Kravitz still rocks out. You know, Lenny Kravitz is a biracial man who identifies as an African American. So a lot of times, you know, people are picking and talking, but they're either completely ignorant, they have no knowledge of any type of history, or they're stupid and they choose not to educate themselves. You know, that's all it boils down to. I'm pretty sure no black person who has any roots to the struggle through the Middle Passage, African diaspora, whether you went to the Caribbean, what is now known as the Caribbean, or you came up here through Charleston or Jamestown and enslaved, none of them spoke English.
True.
So we have a lot of ignorant practices in our community that are just not helping us. And Courtney, to your point, how can we educate our youth when we are kids ourselves? When you have 14 and 15-year-olds who have two children, you know, these are ninth and 10th graders with two babies or a baby on their hip and one on the way. They're not smart enough to fill out a job application without help. So how, and I'm not saying that to tear anybody down, but that's the reality of what we deal with. How are these children don't even have high school diplomas? It's hard to get through college with one kid. Can you imagine trying to get through high school with two? I mean, so how are we gonna educate our children when we've not first educated ourselves, or we've walked away from the education that was provided to us?
Well, this is Archange. Let me just say something real quick. I think at this, while we continue to, while we'll always have some challenges in our community, just like every other community, I think we need to continue to highlight some of the greatness that's been happening in our community. I mean, we're talking about, you know, we have some educational advancements in our community. We have the amount of young black men graduating, young black sisters graduating, not just with undergraduate degrees, with advanced degrees. You're talking about, in terms of teen pregnancies, the numbers of black women, young black mothers, single mothers have dropped in this country. The increasing number is actually white women in this country. You're talking about out of all the fathers, out of all fathers in this country, black men, according to some of the latest research as of, what, 2 years ago, a year ago, was said that black fathers are some of the most engaged fathers in the lives of their kids in the entire country out of every other group. And so again, while there are major issues that we just highlighted, we need to continue to also show the progress that a lot of our groups are making. And I think that while we do have, you know, quote unquote ignorant, quote unquote people who don't know, we have a lot of parents who are doing a hell of a job teaching their kids African American history, black history, and teaching them kids to be proud of who they are and also to be respectful of other folks who have different complexion of skin or might be in other islands throughout this world or throughout different countries in this world. And so again, I just felt the need just to kind of make sure that, you know, again, while we're highlighting some of the challenges and where we need to continue making improvement, we need to continue showing where we have made some major advancements. And I think even with voting records, you see how black folks have come out in droves and been active, you know, obviously with the presidential election. And so we're trying to see if that can happen in the midterms as well. But again, I think those are some of the positives that we need to continue highlighting outside of the challenges.
I definitely agree with you. There are a lot of improvements that we're making as a society, but when I ran for city council at home, my hometown is a very big horse community. A lot of old money, these huge plantation style homes, all this great stuff. A lot of people own horses and all of this stuff. And Kentucky Derby winners, great, amazing. One thing I said about the preservation of the history of that in my hometown was, if this community wants to continue to hold itself in high regard and have other people hold them in high regard, then they're going to have to do the work. They're going to have to be the ones that highlight their success and highlight what they bring to the table. They're going to have to be the ones that highlight what they're accomplishing. So it honestly, you know, to speak as a testament to what you just said, it is honestly up to us to make sure that we're putting those things out there. But again, self-inflicted ignorance, people not wanting to know. people choosing to not educate themselves. So all of the stats can be out there. You can have them, you know, a beautiful new magazine type pamphlet with all of the information and all the statistics printed, and they're readily available and they're free. And we can mail them out, and we can send them out via email, and you can have all of the websites, and you can send them to every church and every clinic and every state agency, county agency, every community center and rec center and park in the community. But if somebody's not going to read the information, they're not going to read the information. And that's our problem in our community. We want we want the media to stop showing us in horrible light, but we keep giving them the fuel to do so. We want the media to say, hey, you know, our black men are actually involved in their children's lives, but that's not what we're seeing portrayed on television. That's not what we're seeing portrayed via, you know, social media and things of that nature. So a part of that is, if we want America to see us in a different light, there are going to have to be some fundamental changes that we put in action and we put in place so that we can actually, the change that we've seen or the change that we know can be reflected when people look at us.
I mean, I totally understand in terms of us continuing to focus on personal and professional development, as well as taking responsibility for individual actions as well as community. But again, I just look at it, if you look at the history of America, I mean, you're talking about black people who came from different parts of this world, ended up in this country, and we were the most loyal, hardworking group of people out there. There was no group that worked harder than us because we worked totally for free, and we did everything as a hell of a job. And immediately after the Emancipation Proclamation, you had people trying to start businesses and build their own lives and build their own homes. And history will always show you that every time black folks started to come together to try to improve, there was systematic ways of tearing down businesses and homes and communities, and that has happened for many years. And so again, when you talk about trying to portray ourselves in a positive light, I think we've had men and women advance to becoming getting advanced degrees while their parents were just coming out of slavery. And so I'm saying, I think as a group, for a group that's been subjugated for this amount of time in America, we've been doing a hell of a job with, I mean, looking at where we should be to where we are. And so again, I think if we're putting the burden on us to present ourselves in a positive light, and then the media would take on it, I don't think that will ever happen. I think, again, I don't think this country and its history has ever shown that it's presenting us in a positive light. The positive light has always been us trying to do it, and then us putting pressure on other groups to see this positiveness, like W.E. Du Bois having to go all the way to Europe to show that there are black people who wear suits and can build, who invent stuff. And so again, I completely agree the one aspect, but I do think that if we continue to look at this country's history, black people have been doing well for a very long time, but we haven't got any of the credit, and we will continue to not get the credit that easy. It will always be very hard.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, the beauty of it is that, you know, it's another reason why I think that the president's election was so important for a lot of kids today. Because, I mean, we obviously know, because we've grown up and we've finished college or entered into the workforce. So we know that people in the black community can do really great things. But imagine if you're a kid growing up, and like you were saying just now, Arcade, it's so hard to sometimes, you know, not have a negative story about the black community in the media. You know, it's really difficult to, I mean, just very simply have really good stories out there about what's happening in the black community. And I think President Obama's election, to me, and especially for a lot of young kids out there, it showed that, we are more than capable of becoming more than just basketball players, football players, and rappers, or whatever the stereotypical, cliche thing is that some people out there expect. And it really, let people know that, hey, there are more possibilities out there. The administrator for NASA right now, Charles Bolden, is an African American. He was also an astronaut. And there have been 16 other astronauts that have gone up into space from the United States. And so many more other accomplishments that have been made throughout the Black community. Obviously the problem is a lot of people are just finding out about this stuff because, slowly but surely it's starting to come out more to the forefront that, hey, there are Black people today, and especially in history, who have done incredible things. I mean, look at the Tuskegee Airmen, for instance. Great fighter pilots back in World War II. So, I think that, in society today, the more we see people like Barack Obama on the forefront, which he has been for, good reasons and bad, depending on if you're watching, Fox News or not. But point is, you see this man doing a lot of great things. You see him on the forefront. A lot of kids are seeing this, and it puts a lot of hope in the minds of people who maybe are growing up in a poor community, for instance, who, you have this kid in middle school or high school, and they're thinking, how in the world am I going to succeed one day? How in the world am I going to, work out of this situation? And then you turn on the TV and you see a Black president, and it really just puts things into perspective for you that, hey, things are possible. Maybe I can get out of this bad neighborhood and get an education and move on to something greater one day. And even though, I mean, I'm not a big fan of his, but Dr. Ben Carson, he's achieved some pretty amazing things in his life, becoming a neurosurgeon. And I mean, he's obviously of a really different political persuasion than I am, but I really respect the fact that he has gotten to the stage that he's at today, and I can't even imagine what it's like to become a neurosurgeon, but the fact that he's accomplished that, and he's fought so many barriers to get where he's at today, and I think that's true for many other people in the Black community who have gone really far, who have worked themselves out of these bad neighborhoods, and these stories, these amazing stories, are starting to make it their way around to more people out there and giving us more hope, or at least tangible hope, in the sense that, hey, if they can work hard and succeed, then I can do the same.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that I often say this whenever I'm speaking in front of a group of people. I think it's really interesting when I have people, I actually have had people who are not African American say to me that I believe that President Obama made it so much harder for you. And made it so much harder for Black people. I don't believe he did. I think that his election just opened the door for me to know that I can actually be great. It's one thing for your parents to tell you every day growing up, oh, you're gonna be awesome. You're a king. You come from kings. You come from queens. You're royalty. You're gonna do great things. Blah 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 blah. Like my parents spoke, my family, my church, my community spoke greatness into my life. But it's another thing to finally be able to believe that. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I know I needed to see a Black president in my lifetime. And I'm so grateful that I was able to see that at the age of 23. And I was able to work on this man's campaign. I was able to bring this man to my college campus and bring his wife to my college campus and meet this man and shake his hand and talk to him. Meet his wife, shake her hand, talk to her, and then I was actually able to be employed by the campaign. It helped me to be able to believe in myself. But I'm not gonna deter from this, Antoine. Archange. I understand what you're saying 100%. But at the end of the day, it is up to us to take care of our community and to move our community forward. We have to do that. We can sit here and talk about, everything that happened in slavery, and we can talk about the Egyptians who built the pyramids that are still up to this day. We can talk about all these great things that happened in the past and all the horrible things that happened in the past. I'm concerned about 2015 and where we are or where we are not going as a community. And I believe that it's up to us. We can highlight every single great thing that a young person of color or young African American male or female is doing in this great country. But if we don't know it, there's a problem. And if we refuse to educate ourselves to get the information and get the knowledge, there's a problem. If you're black in America and you don't know that the mayor of Compton is a young African American woman who is doing great things to restore that community, Asia Brown, there is something wrong with you. You need to get your life together. You need to know that. If you don't know that the mayor of Baltimore is a young African American person, like when I say young, I mean under the age of 35, like there's something wrong with you. We have to start taking an interest in our own selves. And we don't do that. We're interested in everything else except ourselves. We're more interested, and don't get me wrong, because I love Ratchet TV. I love Empire. I love The Housewives. I love Power and Survivor's Remorse. Like, there's some good black television out there, and it speaks to my spirit. I enjoy every bit of it. But I'm not more concerned. But I'm not more concerned about what Nene Leakes is doing than I am about what Rashad is doing. And I'm not more concerned about the Housewives of Atlanta than I'm concerned about the black people in Aiken, South Carolina, or the black people across America. Like, I am concerned with my community. We have to start being concerned with ourselves, concerned with our families, and concerned with our communities. And I am not so sure that the masses of black Americans are tuned into that concept. Because if they were, I believe that we would see different fruit coming from our community.
Well, I mean, Rashad, I mean, just a question, for the group here. I mean, just to expand on what you said further, look at where a lot of the youth's attention is shifted towards today. Now, I told you guys before, I love rock music, heavy metal, and all of that, but I love hip hop too. But you see a lot of kids today idolizing people like Young Thug, for instance. More people are listening and paying attention to what he's saying versus, maybe what's happening with, some vote popping up in Congress later, or not even concerned at all with what's happening with student loan interest rates and many other issues affecting the young community. So, I mean, I feel like, again, this goes back to what we learn at home and what people are teaching their kids or not teaching their kids. Because when we have more people idolizing, people like Young Thug, Lil Wayne, not that they're horrible people, but I'm just saying our community, our kids, our youth, or our young adults are obviously shifting their attention towards things that are not productive, And I mean.
So yeah, let me just quick maybe just throw a little different perspective at this. I mean, you talked about just the music. I mean, the reality is hip hop goes beyond black borders. It's international, and I was looking at some of the statistics. I mean, I think I was looking at some of the research and how you have some of the white communities purchasing more hip-hop music than black groups, and I don't think these artists would be as successful as they weren't today compared to back in the 80s if it wasn't for groups beyond black borders purchasing these music. So again, if we're really talking about people who listen to music and the influence the music happens to them, then I think that we should have an epidemic across color lines. And so I guess the question, we need to figure those things out. But in terms of our perceptions of people who we feel are not engaged, who are not active, who are doing stuff that we think are counterproductive, I just think that people like that have always existed. And I think one thing that we forget about MLK is MLK did a lot of work in the South, but then MLK switched it up, and he spent time in Chicago. When he went to Chicago, they weren't doing the same work he was in the slums, and he was meeting gangbangers out there who didn't want anything to do with anything. They didn't want to information. They wasn't on non-violence. They were like, you touch me, I'm going to touch you. And I'm tired of hearing from you preachers and you ministers and you politicians. But he took the time to spend with them, to show them that he was committed to them. That's why he spent time there. And by teaching them, spending time with them, and showing them, he was able to win them over, and clearly had people who were affiliated with gangs more engaged, more active, understanding themselves, and actually part of the nonviolent movement. So I think, again, it brings it back to the point of people actually care more than we give them credit for. I think some of the things that they do is because sometimes they feel hopeless. When you feel hopeless, sometimes you just don't care, and you don't care about your own self. But instilling hope into people, showing them, directing them, educating them, will kind of put them on another path. And the question is that we have to always ask ourselves are, what are we actually doing? And what are we doing collectively as a community? What are we doing collectively as individuals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on the other hand, I just feel that we always have to watch out with this we have to get it together thing. And again, I'm a strong component of giving our community constructive criticism, giving each other constructive criticism, and also receiving constructive criticism. But when we talk about the black community, what we have to continue to remember is black community is the American community. I mean, you have black people in this country whose roots are invested in this soil of this land more than you have with some Italian Americans and Irish Americans and Jewish Americans and German Americans. And so whenever we have a situation with Americans who happen to be black, why do we always feel that we have to continue to put ourselves in this individual isolated box, get it together, and then we can mainstream ourselves? And so I think that is a very dangerous thing, because this country was based on the investment of groups of people and individuals. And Malcolm and Martin Luther King said it very clearly, that there were a lot of policies that were never invested into black people. And I think that if we continue to look at the state of black people from a policy perspective, we could see that there's been lack of investment, a lack of training, a lack of investment. Wherever you've seen black people in black communities grow and progress, it's because we had partnerships with our government. And so again, as we continue to work with things individually and get our homes together and get our communities together and be constructively and criticize our communities, we also need to understand that we are America, and America needs to continue to work with us to get us to where we need to be. That's my opinion.